Well, it wasn't really disputed, not ever effectively. There were never guys that, that came in that attacked it. There were people that quibbled over it, but these were people that just quibbled over it because that was that's what they did for a living, quibble over things like that. But they couldn't dispute it scientifically and prove it not to be. There was some English guy or some New Zealand guy that quibbled over this or quibbled over that, but let me tell you where that comes from, because I learned this back in the 80s about things that went on in the 70s. Somewhere during the time frame when CNN was fairly new, they did a poll, and this poll had 3,000 respondents. I read this on an airline magazine. That's where I found this out. 3,000 respondents. And there were two questions asked. The first question of the 3,000 was, how many of you believe that there is something beyond the physical? 98% of the people said, we believe there's something beyond the physical. 2% said, we don't believe there's anything beyond physical. We think that's stupid. It's, life is finite. It's over. It's over. It's done. Those 2% are always showing up to argue with the others, right? But they are such a minority. They are such a speck in the actual global society that my position has always been to completely ignore them and not to engage with them. If I find out they're in a class of mine, like in the early days, when I have a class of 500, there would be one or two of them sneaking into the class, trying to disrupt things in the class. I'd have them removed from the class. I'm not going to let poison like that be in the class. These are people about possibility, right, for themselves. So these people are about the 2%. There's nothing here. So let me just come in and cause problems. The next question asked of the 98% was, how many of you believe that if there's something beyond the physical, you can interact with it, that you can give to it, take from it, learn from it, right? Recognize it. How many of you believe that? 24% of that 98% said, we believe in something beyond the physical, and we believe that we can interact with it. In fact, we have interacted with it, or words to that effect. The other 74% or 76% said, we believe there's something beyond the physical, but we don't believe that we will ever realize it or interact with it until we're gone, right? Till we die. Those are not agnostics. Those are believers, right? In there. They're believers. They believe something. The truth is, out of all 3,000 respondents, everybody believes something. Even the 2%. They can't prove that there is or there isn't. They just believe it. So that's how that stands. That gives clarity to me. In 2019, the Pew Research Center did another similar study, but these respondents were global, and it was massive in terms of the number of data points collected. And the number from 2% in their perspective increased to something like 7%. So a disbelief in anything beyond the physical increased internationally to 7%. I'll explain more about that in a moment. The rest of it, of the people who believe there's maybe something beyond the physical but don't believe they'll ever interact with it, the Dutch actually came up with a word called iets, which means something. So I believe in something. That was the word described for that whole demographic of people who believe there must be something. I don't know what it is, but I don't know that I'll ever be part of it. So the people that now stand squarely in the zone of, I believe there's something beyond the physical, and I believe I can connect with it, was now diminished down to 18% of the global population believes that. So what went wrong? 20 years of war? Because as you understand, you had coming out of the 60s came what? Do you know? Remember? The New Age movement, right?
Yep.
Out of the flower children and all of the yogis and the other things, the New Age movement began. That continued through the 70s. It waned and gained and came through the 80s. And in the 90s, it started to swell. And why? Because the millennial change was coming. And all of them, were lined up waiting for the millennial change, because this is where you heard people talking about the Mayan calendar, all this stuff, and all these things are going to happen. People were wearing certain colors of clothes. I mean, I know I would be at the Omega Institute. I'd have 500 remote viewing students, and I would have people turning their nose up at us because they were learning a military intelligence collection methodology. But these people wearing certain kinds of sandals and certain kinds of robes, these were not monks. These were just people who thought that by wearing the color of that clothes, it would put them in a pious position over others. And you just started seeing that more and more and more. And of course, the millennial transformation comes in. Not much of a transformation. It's just like calendar change, right?
Right.
And a year later, we're at war. And we are at war for a very long time. Now, just to give you an indication of what happened there, back in the 80s and the 90s, there were some 3,600, universities of spiritual learning, let's call them that, like the Omega Institute, Esalen, Kirpala, the Crossings and Austin, Texas. Everywhere, right? And they were profitable. They had people coming and learning, and Thich Nhat Hanh and John Kabat-Zinn and Eckhart Tolle and Deepak Chopra, you name it. They were all there. And then there was me talking about remote viewing. But there were massive quantities of those things. Soon as 9/11, people stopped going there. Not all, but enough to take 3,600 of those institutions down to less than 300 globally. And many of them just closed up shop. I know Glenn Beck and his wife, who Glenn Beck was the original, he was the first marketing director at Dell. Mm-hmm. And when he retired, he took all of his stock options, cashed them in, came in a multi-millionaire. He and his wife decided that they were going to build one of these spiritual training centers. It was going to have amazing spa. It was going to have, amazing yoga stuff, a really powerful thing. And they put millions into the Crossings in Austin, Texas. They would go out, camp on the site, meditate on the site. They wanted to make sure that the Crossings, when it was constructed, set softly on the site. That was what Ken told me, Ken and Joyce. And they were amazing people. They created this most amazing place. If you ever look at online, Crossings, Austin, Texas. I was one of the first instructors that was there, and it just dwindled off into nothing. And it's now, it's like a conference rental place, right?
What do you think? What do you think caused all? Just a letdown after the, and then. But why wouldn't war cause people to want to seek more spiritual guidances, or is it? What's the logic behind it?
See, something on that scale, it's all about the energy again, right? And if you read Itzhak Bentzoff and you understand, this quantum mechanical perspective of these things, it goes into things that are like into resonance, entrainment. It goes into concepts like constructive wave interference, destructive wave interference. It carries with it on a global scale, with affecting the global society, not just the soldiers in the firefights.
Is this related to like the four turnings?
Yeah, it's very much like that. We've been in a fourth turning, which is the destructive phase of the global societal evolution. Strauss and Howard, the guys that graphed that, put it together, but it's a concept that's been talked about since the beginning of time. And as that goes, if you read the book, it goes that what happens is we go through a destructive phase, a rebuilding phase, a sustainment phase, an unraveling phase, a destructive phase. That cycle can go anywhere from 85 to 150 years. These are fuzzy measurements of time, meaning that the global society affects how long a destructive phase lasts. It can be protracted or it can be contracted. We've already gone through quite a protracted one, and there is really no end in sight, because now Afghanistan ends, but the Ukraine begins. And that what's going on, especially today, is, I don't want to sound esoteric, but just from the physics perspective, it is real that there is a global societal resonance.
Right. With cycles, it's wave resonance. You're talking like the language of waves, like the frequency at which something vibrates.
That is correct. And if you use Itzhak Bentov's model, we are all just raisins in jelly. And as one raisin vibrates more powerfully than the other raisins, all of the other raisins entrain to that powerful waveform. And there are very few ways in which for you not to do that. It takes a great concerted effort of being responsible for yourself in the moment that allows you to do that. And cutting off environmental toxins, like I said to you, I don't watch the news. I don't want to watch it. And I find out, if a tsunami was heading my way, I'm sure that I would find out about it. If not, okay. But I've never, since I stopped listening to it, back in the early.
I think the challenge, though, is if you're not in tune, or if you're less in tune with those resonances, if you kind of go your own way, life is harder. Like I felt that way myself, where I just you'll see this. It feels like a mass psychosis sometimes, and you're just looking at the data, and you're like, I don't get it. Why,
Well, no, I I understand the perspective of what you're saying. I'm saying that in my environment, where I am, I don't want to be affected by false messaging, and I don't want to be infected by the packaging of news being thrown at me. If there's really something that I feel like I want to look at, I'll find it, and I'll look at it from not some blog or some news source. I'll find it from a peer-reviewed research, and I'm smart enough as a researcher to look backwards and say, who paid for this? So what's the real message here? It means a lot of reading and a lot of listening to certain kinds of books that I want to listen to or read, but I'm not going to let television color my life and decide what my frequency is going to be, what my resonant frequency is going to be. I know that watching something like that changes my actual physiology. It really does.
It probably makes you angry. Like it does for most people, right?
Of course. It's designed to do that more so and more so every turn of the clock. They're finding new ways to impact you visually, auditorily, right, informationally. They're trying to disrupt, and that more, unfortunately, in the human condition, it seems that the more disrupted we become, the more we become addicted to the disruption, and that is part of the whole entrainment of those kinds of things. What happens, and truly, back to this thing, if you're going to change that stuff, you have to have a way to disconnect from that. There's an individual moment in which that's the only thing we're truly in charge of. Then there is there's a moment of close friends. That's where you are affiliate. All of you are together, and all of you are resonating in a certain way or not. There's a family moment, right? The collective family moment. The individuals coming together for that collective family moment, that entrainment.
If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like, subscribe, and notification buttons. Additionally, if you have any feedback, please put something in the comments below. And lastly, if you want to watch the full episode of this clip, you can find it above. Thanks again for watching.